Christian parenting.
Hey, Emily, welcome to Part of the Mess. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. We just met, so I'm getting to know you a little bit. But for those that are listening and don't know you, will you just introduce yourself and your family and what you're up to these days?
Of course. I'm Emily Jensen. Most people, if they've heard of my name, have heard it connected to the ministry of Risen Motherhood. So I co-founded that with my sister-in-law, Laura Wiffler, and we have a podcast and a lot of free resources that aim to bring gospel hope to mom. But as you mentioned, I am a mom, and so I live in central Iowa with my husband. We've been married for almost 16 years, and we have 5 children ranging in age from 2nd grade to 6th grade. And I always feel like I need to clarify that I have a set of twins in there, and that is how the math works out when you start to think about the ages and stages. But I have 4 boys, I have a girl at the end, and so we have a very busy household. And then something that's, I guess, interesting for some people to know about our family is we have our 4th child has some pretty significant disabilities.
Okay.
Our family dynamic is just really interesting. We have a lot going on, but we're enjoying that kind of late elementary, early middle school stage of life.
That's amazing. Did you always know you wanted to have a big family?
Yeah, my husband and I talked about that from really early on. And surprisingly, actually, we had an even bigger number in our heads, but the more kids we had, the more that number kept getting smaller and smaller, and we're very happy with where we're at now. So it's a lot.
That's amazing. Do you get the most ridiculous comments out in the public, like you're a circus act or something?
Yeah, I more so when they were all little, because we had our kids so close together. It really did look crazy, especially when we traveled and stuff like that. But either I have learned to tune it out, or people don't notice as much anymore, because I feel like the last few years it's gotten a little better.
Okay, that's awesome. Well, I'm so excited to have you here. You wrote a book called A Million Tiny Moments, and I didn't know Lori was your sister-in-law. That's kind of fun. And it's such a beautiful book. And I was thinking today, I'm like, ooh, people could even Amazon it and probably get it in time for Mother's Day. And I was flipping through it and I just feel like, man, where was this when I was little? Because it's like for when you were tired and when you were afraid, when you were limited, and there's just so many great nuggets that I was reading through this morning. It's like, God, we just need that as moms. We need like a little burst of hope and encouragement when there's really long days and we're feeling unseen. So is that the mission behind the book? I know you've done a ton of work over the years for moms, but why did you feel like this one was important to put out in the world?
Yeah, I think just like you're saying, moms are tired. We have a lot on our minds and our plates already. And sometimes even something as seemingly simple as reading a book can feel daunting and overwhelming. And we want that truth, we want that hope, but we don't have the brain space to be overwhelmed and sort of like do all the mental work ourselves. So we do have some other books that dig a little bit deeper, but this one we really felt like had these bite-sized writings that sort of dealt with whatever a mom's felt need is in that moment, and kind of like did the work for her to just kind of say, hey, here's the truth, here's the hope you need to remember in this moment. And you can read these in, 2 minutes or less. Some of these shorter entries. So that was kind of our hope, was to be able to package this up in just like a really accessible felt need way for moms.
But it was basically like, maybe it was you or Laura that wrote, basically there was a time in your life that you were like, God, I'll do anything. I'll just be a missionary. I'll move my life. And he was basically like, love your kids, love your husband.
Yes.
And that's so good. It's just like little bite-sized encouragement. You're like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to just be faithful with what God's given me, which is just an easy and important reminder all the time. So love what you've done. I want to talk today about the mental load. And I remember seeing this, maybe it was an article or something that went viral. And it was the first time I felt like someone did a good job of like trying to explain. And here's the way that they describe it. I guess AI describes it this way, but the mental load is the invisible, often unspoken, cognitive and emotional labor involved in managing household responsibilities, family schedules, emotional well-being, and it oftentimes disproportionately falls on mothers. And I don't want to get like in a mother-father war, but it just does. And I'm not bitter about it. Ron and I have been married, 22 years, and we're in a great space of like figuring out how to do this. But in the little years, you're like, why is everything falling on me? It can be really overwhelming. And I remember one time I couldn't explain to Ron where I felt like my brain was short circuiting. It was like, I can't keep all this in my mind. And so he's like, write it down. So I literally had a flip chart. We used to work at a PR firm. I had a big old post-it notes with the sticky flip charts. And I just started writing everything that was on my mind. And it really opened his mind to go like, never do I think about that. Never do I think about the dentist. Never do I think about what kind of snacks they have in their soccer bag or whatever, all the things. And so I think it opened his mind, but he also was able to help me kind of pull some of those things out of my mind, get them on a list, move some things over to him. So I imagine you experience this on a level of 10 with 5 kids. So what does the mental load look like over at your house?
Oh man, it is so real. And it's funny you're talking about kind of doing the brain dump because just yesterday I had gotten back from some traveling and we're kind of moving into that, okay, into the school year. I'm thinking about summer. And I went to my husband's office and I was just like, I need you for 20 minutes. And he just set a timer and I said every single thing that was on my mind and he wrote it all on a whiteboard for me and, printed it out.
Yeah.
And we started kind of that strategic conversation of, okay, like what things can he take? What things are on my list? So I do think that there is this constant need to check in and communicate. And I know that for me, for years, I just like didn't communicate really well at all.
Yeah.
I didn't even really, like you said, until I heard the term mental load, I don't even think I was able to sort of put words to what I was feeling and all of the things that were sort of on my plate that I was trying to juggle. And as you know, like in the little years, a lot of it is a little bit more survival and less strategic.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, okay, I'm just trying to get through the end of the day and like everyone's
Yeah.
had their diaper changed and everyone is fed. But I think as the kids have gotten older and we've gotten into things like sports and activities and doctor's appointments and homework, some of those things have gotten, there's not less of them, but maybe they've gotten easier to define and sort of get our arms around. So yeah, mental load is a constant conversation that my husband and I are having and honestly just kind of recalibrating of, again, whose court does this fall in? And then what kind of help do we need? I feel like the word help has really come up a lot because, we'll sometimes realize, wow, like neither of us have capacity to do this. And if that's the case, what does that mean?
Yeah.
like how is that, what things are we both on the same page about saying, oh, we need to like get more support for that? Or maybe this is something that we need to just take off of our family to-do list right now. So it's always kind of, I feel like multiple times per year, sometimes even like every few weeks, we are really having to check in about this. I'm really grateful. I know that not everyone has a husband who even sort of like understands and is willing to engage in this conversation. And I would like start praying. Like I'd like just start with prayer if that's you, because that's a really tough place to be.
Absolutely. And I was thinking, I always think about my 2 friends, Kara and Bridget, who are both single moms, and one's a widow and then one's a product of divorce. And I think like, I don't know how they do it. Like I'm like literally, I don't know how they do it. And so I know there's more moms out there, and I've got to imagine that they've got to have a village as well. It's like, you got to ask for your church or your family or whatever. And sometimes people don't have that, and it breaks my heart. But I think you bring up a great place to start. So I want to talk through some ways, like how do we alleviate that mental load? And I think one of the things years ago when I was a blogger back in the day, I would just be like, I'm sorry, I have to stay up and I have this blog. And he's like, who? And I said, it's a series. I have to post every day. And he's like, wait, who told you to write this? I was like, oh, me. Like I made up these fake deadlines and fake pressures that no one's actually on the internet going like, did Courtney post her blog today? But and I think that can be true of motherhood too, to be like, did we just make this up? It's like, do they actually have to be in gymnastics? They actually don't. Or do they actually have to be on travel ball? They actually don't. Do they need to have a new outfit for every single thing, which I always do? And he's like, they could wear something over and over again. So I think a lot of that assessment is important for us as moms to go, what are things that we added? What are things we actually can't take away? And it's super helpful to talk it through with someone. I know like I'll just get spinning, and I can recognize it now when I feel like I'm about to snap and I have to sit down and talk with him, because he's just more rational. He's like very linear, like things are black and white. And I'm like in the same bucket as like, did I make their dentist appointment? Is will they be able to pass college because they have ADD. You know what I mean? Like it's all like in there, like, so-and-so has a crush. Will she ever get married? Like I just mix in the daily urgent with like these unnecessary fears. Is that just me? Or do you just have this soup of weirdness in your head?
No, that sounds exactly like what's going on in my head. And I think you're right, is the word values really comes to mind for me. And I think knowing both as a couple what we value for our kids and then individually what we tend to value is really helpful and really important. And I think some of those conversations help anchor us whenever we are looking at the schedule and we're looking at the mental load and all the things that need to get done. And we're like, okay, who's going to do what needs to stay, what needs to go? Because sometimes like I value things that my husband is like, yeah, I don't really care if they have Easter outfits, or like, I
Right.
don't really like, and that's a big deal to me. But then I need to be aware that like, if that is something that like, I'm sort of the only person who cares about that, like I may have to take more initiative in that area.
Yeah, it's good.
So we have to kind of have those conversations. And sometimes to your point, I am making standards and rules and expectations that like my husband doesn't even share.
Yeah.
And so having that, hey, we have what we call 10 scale conversations a lot where we'll go, okay, what is this to you on a 10 scale?
Mm,
How important is this to you that we're eating dinner around the table as a family every night, that we're managing our screen time well, that we are planning a family vacation this year? And sometimes like that just helps us get a quick snapshot of like, okay, for me, it's an 8 and for you, it's a 2. So like, what does that mean?
yeah.
What does
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
This is something we like shouldn't spend our time doing? Is this something that, okay, this is really important to one person, so we need to find a way to make it happen. And usually that is just like a really good starting point for us for triaging, like
Yeah.
what needs to happen in this situation. The other word that comes to mind for me is like limits, and
Mm,
just really recognizing, as hard as it is, that we cannot be all things at all times to our children. We're not going to be able to do every single family thing we wanted to do under the sun.
hmm.
We're going to have limits, and we're going to have to accept that there are some things our family doesn't do or can't do.
Yeah.
Those are hard things to sort of grapple with.
Yeah.
I think even, when that comes up for me, sometimes it'll be like around spring break or winter, and, somebody's taking a ski trip and somebody's got their kids going to Disney, and you kind of just start this spiral of like, oh, do we need to be like a ski family? Do we need to be a
Right.
Disney family? Do we need to, or like these kids are in travel sports, and you're like, oh, do we need to be a travel sports family? And again, just going back to anchoring of what is it as a married couple that we really value? What are our true goals for our children? I know there's kind of like the surface level, like, of course, we want them to have all these fun experiences and be good at sports and be good in school. But like, okay, let's boil it way, way down. Like, what are the things we really, really want? Well, we really want our children to grow up to know and love the Lord. We really want our children to grow up and have like good character. And so then just pulling back and going, okay, what are those essential things we need to do to pursue those goals? And then like let some of the other things go.
Gosh, it's so good. It makes me think about long term versus short term. That, I mean, they can be little brats. Sometimes they're like, well, my friends always, my classmate, da da da. And you can get your feelings hurt and be like, so they're unhappy. Like, so short term would be just make them happy, and don't let them be
Yes.
disappointed, which is so natural. But then the long term's like, actually, will that matter when they're 20? Really, it doesn't. And then actually a gift to them. I wish I had said no more. We are a yes house and we have only 2 kids, but I look back and that's one of the things. My husband and I are going to do a podcast soon about just looking back over the 18 years. And I was like, that's one thing we could have done a lot better. It was just be okay with the no and be like, even if they throw an attitude or roll their eyes, it's like, it's actually probably good for them to realize that you can't do it all. And I know you want to do it all, but you can't do it all. So that's such great advice. Can you think of a time where you were feeling just that mental load and you went to God with that and he just met you there? Because I think as we talk about all these things are so helpful. I was like, I almost put a reminder like, Court, you're a Christian podcast. Don't forget to say Jesus. But can you think of a time where you were like, I don't know if I could do another thing, and you're like, Lord, and some things couldn't be canceled. Can you think of a time that God met you there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can think of a time because I feel like I go to the Lord with that all the time.
Yeah.
But recently, the ministry of Risen Motherhood that I mentioned at the beginning, my sister-in-law have been doing, and I have been doing that for almost 10 years. And we actually just recently brought our content creation for that ministry to a close.
Oh,
And that was a really big decision, a really hard decision, but it was one of those things where, I was trying to juggle this ongoing work, this ongoing responsibility with a lot of other really good things. But as our kids have gotten older, activities have gotten more demanding, just like my time looks different. And, serving in the local church, my husband's very involved in a lot of business endeavors here locally, and just kind of realizing like, ooh, we need to really think about this next season because I do have a lot of plates spinning and I can't keep spinning all of them.
yeah,
So what's going to
yeah.
go? And I just, it was a really difficult decision, but the Lord really provided clarity on that. And it was kind of a long off ramp. Like her and I made this decision, well over a year ago. And we
Hmm.
just now have gotten to that point where, hey, the ministry is going to wind down, come to a close. And that was like a work professional change in my life that took a lot of prayer, but the Lord guided and gave clarity. And that was like a bigger decision, but that's one example of,
That's so great.
it's like I think as moms, sometimes we don't want to do this, but we have to be willing to have those moments where we go to the Lord and we truly say everything's on the table,
Yeah.
and we really open our hands up and we say, okay, Lord, like use your word and your guidance and the wise people in my life and help me really truly evaluate this and not have anything that I'm holding with such clenched
Mm,
fists that if
so
you were
good.
to say, no more in whatever this area is that I'm sort of resisting that. And we're always going to have our core things. Like again, if you're married and you have kids, like there are some things that like as a mom, like this is just you're going to keep raising your kids, like that's not on the table. But I think in terms of activities, professional endeavors, things like vacations, like we're talking about, like all the optional things that even if culture doesn't say they're optional, those things can come and go at different seasons. We really have to be willing sometimes to like lay those at the Lord's feet.
Man, Emily, I think you're going to give somebody permission to quit something today just because I think your story isn't one of like it wasn't working, so we just phased it out. Like it was on its uphill climb. Like you have a huge community. And so I've done that as well. And I do not regret any of it. I took 3 years off. I stopped speaking. There's all different lanes where I did feel like it was one of those things that needed to go. And that's a hard thing because you're like, Lord, I thought you brought this to me to minister to people and you're using me. And he's like, and I think probably what you feel too is like that's no more valuable than you ministering to the own kids in your life and giving them margin because my kids can tell when I am at my capacity. Like I will literally like shake or like I'll be like lost driving. I mean, there'll be like physical signs. I'll have more migraines. I won't look at them as much. I'll be so conflicted in that overload that when I finally got a taste of true margin several years ago, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm such a better mom. And it's not to say all of us can go quit our jobs, but I love your encouragement of saying like put it all on the table and say like Lord, which thing can close down. So how are you feeling right now? Is it bittersweet? Are you sad? Are you okay?
Yes, it is bittersweet. I mean, like I said, it's something we've been planning towards for a long time. So I've had a long time to process it.
Hmm.
But truly, like you said, when you're in that state of the mental load and the overwhelm, and you just know you're going at a pace that's not sustainable long term, and you are, I mean, all the things you're saying, getting lost while driving or feeling like you can't look your kids in the eye and you're on your phone too much or you're man, it's like another dinner, another dinner that we're just like sort of throwing together, and that is not a fun place to live and a fun
Yeah.
place to be. And so I am overall honestly like really excited to see some of that margin return and to say,
Yeah.
okay, I don't have a bunch of things on my calendar. And as I was downloading with my husband yesterday about, okay, what are the focus areas in this next season? It was so exciting to me to be able to like say, oh yeah, I have space to like plan dinner. Like that's
Yeah.
one of my goals. It's so simple, but it's like to not kind of be rushing and throwing that together at the last minute or to like exercise. Man, that's again
Mm,
a thing that sometimes as moms, like we need fresh air, we need to move our bodies. Like these are basic human things that help us function. And sometimes that kind of stuff just gets pushed
yep.
to the
Yep.
very edges. And, I can say like, yeah, I have like, that's one of my goals is to like be able to go for a walk most days of the week. I don't think that's too high of an ask.
No, but what's interesting is that's not the things that will look cool on Instagram. But
Right.
it's like nobody's giving you a trophy to be like, "Hey, good job." But and I know that like the things, the unseen things are taking care of us and our families way better than the seen things. And so I think that we get this twisted view on, and I blame social media for everything, but I think we do. We look at other people and we're like, "Oh my gosh, she does this and that. She's got a company and, all that." But underneath the surface, you don't know what's going on at home. You don't know like there's plenty of kids. I think about this all the time. Plenty of kids that were products of parents in ministry that have estranged relationships and are like, yeah, they shared the gospel with the world, but they didn't have time for me. And so I never wanted anything either of us ever did to take the place of our relationship with our kids. And so I'm really proud of you. It's like, I just met you, but I'm like, you're a season below me. And I'm like, you'll be so thankful. And this will probably return in some creative way that you're like, oh God, if I hadn't quit, I wouldn't have seen the next thing
Yes.
coming. But good job. Good job.
Thank you.
All right. So I made a list. So, what are some of the ways we can alleviate the mental load? You've talked about a ton. We've talked about going to God on this. We've talked about just regular, consistent communication, which with your husband. And I think that it was oftentimes Ron would say, like, well, I didn't know. So it's on me it's on him to kind of pick up. It's like, did you not hear me slamming the dishes like for 20 minutes? I don't know. That was a sign. But I think it's on me to say, like, he wants to be needed to say, I'm not, sometimes I'm there, just listen. And then sometimes like, can you help me figure out what to do? Like I feel frozen and this all feels too much. And he's really good at that. And so I think vocalizing that is huge. One tip I was going to give you, you probably already figured this out with many kids, but the other day with graduation and everything coming, my list is so long, but I have my list, I have both girls' lists, and it's all in one. And the other day I was like, that's it. They're teenagers. So I made a shared note and I put all of Ella's stuff because it was not just me knowing those things were coming. It was me following up with her at 18 years old to be like, have you declined the colleges you're not going to? Have you sent in the pictures you need for that? And so, I can't expect her to be responsible for all of it, but I can literally physically move the list to her and she checks in and then we check in. But it took this it was so practical, but it took responsibility off of my shoulders to be like, that's her list. And this is Larson's list. And she's 16 and she can do all these things. And so is that something that you, even with kids in elementary school, that you're like, they can help, they can do more than we give them credit for. So what are some things you're giving to your boys and daughter?
Yes, totally. And like you said, it's always difficult because there's that training and equipping element too. And so I want it to be like when I hand it to an adult and I'm like, okay, you're responsible for the dishes now. And then like, there you go. That was that. But that's not how it looks. And so I think that for me, I'm also having to constantly like reset my expectations and like, okay, yes, I'm handing this off, but then like, what is the expectation? And so all of our boys in fifth and sixth, so they're twins in fifth grade, and I have a sixth grader, they do all their own laundry now, wash, dry, and put away. It does not look the way I think clean clothes should look always, but that is something that they do and they're responsible for. And so I would say like every few weeks, I'll notice some things are just looking a little bit too stained or a little bit too wrinkly, or, there's too much laundry on the floor and we have to do sort of a reset and a check-in on that. And then we have like some household chores that rotate again with our older kids, and that would be dishes. And so somebody's theoretically unloading and reloading the dishwasher every day. We have someone who's taking care of trash throughout the house, which is a lot with our family.
Yes, so good.
And we have someone that's responsible for the basement, which is kind of where our kids' rooms are. That's kind of where the kid hangout zone is. And so that person every day is supposed to be saying, okay, is everything up off the floor? Is our library books put away? All of those different things. And then, they're just responsible for things around the house. If we say, hey, we're having a Saturday cleanup day, you guys need to chip in wherever we say to chip in. But it's been fun, especially with my oldest in sixth grade. I think school has helped this a lot, but just also really being responsible for his assignments, for his work, for his projects. And, I have not yet had a child come to me at like 10 p.m. the night before something is due. So I don't know what I will do in that situation, but I think like historically, my husband and I have said, no, you're going to feel the effects of the lack of planning. If, this isn't something that's going to ruin your whole life.
Yeah.
And so we really try to say school, kind of like your job is something you're responsible for. And so we want to come alongside you in that. We want you to feel supported. Some of our kids need more support than others, but certainly like getting their backpack ready, remembering all the things that they need for school. You know, we have kids that if you forget an instrument, like we're probably not going to run it up to school for
So
you.
good. Yeah.
You're just going to have to like do that one day without your instrument and you're going to survive and then you probably won't forget it again. So just kind of working through that. Like you said, they need to help that mental load. I literally with 5 kids cannot remember what day they have band practice on.
Right.
Like they
That's
have to
so good.
remember that. And we have a child with, like I said, pretty significant disabilities. And so he requires a whole nother set of mental
Yeah.
load that I can't, give that to anyone else. And I think, for better, for worse, our kids are learning that, we do really truly have limits and capacity that maybe other parents don't have
Yeah.
because we've got to like funnel a lot of that towards him. And then our other kids have got to kind of pick up
So
the
good.
slack.
Well, and what you'll see is I've noticed in the areas that I have given them responsibility, there's just confidence. Like, oh, you believe
Yeah.
I can handle this. And then the areas where I think I'm doing it because I just want to care for you and I'm here for you and I'm supporting you somehow sends a message, especially to my older one that's 18. She's like, you don't think I can do it? Like that sends a message that like, I don't trust you and your decisions and your care of this. So I'm just going to handle it because I can do it better. And so I've had to really watch that, especially with the first one. The second one's super independent. I mean, she could like move to Europe right now, but I think it's a second child thing, but also going like, hey, I'm sorry that in my idea to help and to mother, I didn't let go soon enough. And there's different areas where I did let go way earlier, but it's been an interesting journey. This year has been interesting to kind of assess and be like, it wasn't awful. We did pretty good. We got some great kids, but the things I would do. So keep up the good work. I think boys knowing to do their laundry is their future wives can be like, thank you. Thank you
Yes.
so, so much.
Oh, good. That's like one of my goals, right? Is to like help the next generation of men carry the mental load, right? Where I'm like, okay, like you can think about these things. Like we want them to know how to cook. We want them to know how to keep a space clean and picked up and keep their laundry taken care of. And just know that like, hey, those things exist like as people.
Yeah.
Whatever person you are, you have to do this. Whether
That's right.
you're a bachelor living in your house or you're married and you have a family, like these are part of responsibilities that are part of life that are unfortunately they're not going away. So let's go ahead and get used to them.
That is great. And I think in the beginning, I talked about some of these things disproportionately fall on moms. And I think it's like you look back and be like, was that culture that said, and I don't know if it's also just a lot of men would work outside the home and the women were in the home, that a lot of these things fell. But I do think my husband and this generation of guys are doing such a great job of carrying so much around the house that, generations past maybe had not. So I think we're moving in the right direction. And by the time your sons or husbands, they're going to be like, I got this. I'm running the house. I love it. Okay. So let's talk about Mother's Day. So it can be such a bust. And I think we can go into it with such like emotions and then feel like the kid didn't write a note or the husband kind of forgot or whatever. So do you say this is what would feel loving to me on Mother's Day? Give us some tips as we head into Mother's Day this week. Is it just like, Laura, you just fill me up and remind me that my work matters? Or how do you approach Mother's Day?
Yeah, I would say my expectations are just very, very low. Speaking of values, I would say just we're not a big celebratory gift giving family. Like we don't do a lot for birthdays. We don't do a ton for holidays. And so that carries over to Mother's Day for better or for worse. And I'm aware. I try to be like aware now of like, okay, what's realistic according to the way our family tends to do things. Like I shouldn't probably expect something wild on Mother's Day because that's not how we do it any other time. And I do think communication.
Yeah.
And I have just gotten a lot better at, especially when an anniversary comes up, saying to my husband, a few weeks in advance, like, hey, I'm really hoping that you will take initiative to plan a date this year. And like, here's what that would look like.
That's great.
And I know that that's so hard, right? Like we can get so annoyed. Like, well, I shouldn't have to tell him. He should just want to. And I think the reality is like, if I'm being like most objective, my husband absolutely wants to love me and make me feel special. But his definition and version of that is just different than mine.
Yeah.
And so it's not a matter of, he doesn't want to honor me as a mom, or he doesn't want to make me feel special, or he doesn't want to give me that time. I just think like, again, that may not be the way he likes being loved. And so we have to just get on the same page about that. But, I just try to, like you said, realize that I don't need gifts or like some really special time to know like my family loves me, my family cares for me. And if there is something I'm wanting, I'm trying to communicate that in advance.
Yeah.
And, it's hard. It reminds me too, it's really convicting to me of how am I honoring the people in my life that
That's
maybe are never
right.
going to say anything. And, I think like my parents on their birthdays or, so
So
I
true.
think like I try to use that feeling that I have as sort of how could I bless other people in this way if I realize like,
I
oh, it's kind
love
of
that.
hard to let that day pass and
Or
not
even
get
like
involved.
Father's Day. I'm like, I want all this. And I'm like, I barely do anything for Father's Day. So it's like,
Exactly.
what would he want to hear? And how could I help the kids have a moment to say, hey, it would be nice for dad to feel like we notice what he does or the dad that he has on Father's Day. And then but I do think just mentioning, because I love languages are such a thing, but Ron's like, I can't keep up with yours. Cause it's like, well, this year she wanted gifts. Last year she didn't, wanted time. So I think I can say to him, hey, I love the way you said that. Is like what I'm hoping for this week is just a couple hours by myself. That would be the best gift ever. And then he's been tipped off to go, oh, this year she's really overwhelmed with the people and just needs to
Yeah.
go by herself for a couple hours or whatever the thing is. But I love that you brought that up. One year I wrote a note of thanks to the mothers, not just my moms, but the moms that were in my life. So like my best
Mhm.
friend's mom. And it touched them at such a level that I think we should challenge ourselves this year to be like, okay, yes, it would be nice if we got these 2-page letters from our kids saying how amazing, but who could we love on this
Yeah.
week? Even just a text or a phone call would be so awesome. Okay, so I'm going to let you end, and I want you to go wherever the Lord's leading you on this. But there's a mountain of moms listening to this that are just feeling tired and overwhelmed and unseen and all the things. And so I would love for you just to encourage them from one mom to another, and especially a mom who's spent 10 years pouring into moms.
Yeah. Well, I totally understand. I wish that wasn't a norm in motherhood, but it absolutely is. But I think what's also really true and important to remember if you are a Christian is that your goodness before the throne of God, the question of whether or not you are good has been settled in Christ Jesus. And so you don't have to mother or live from a place of striving and fearing failure and feeling like, oh, I just don't know if I'm doing a good enough job. You can
Mm,
mother from a place of someone who's received grace, someone who is loved, someone who has a special mission, someone who has incredible gifts and abilities, someone who is provided for. And I think it's important to start there. That is the essentials of who we are as a believer.
mm.
That is the place from which we are loving others and working hard and caring for our children. So anytime I really start to feel that striving, I really have to recalibrate and go, wait a second, who am I in Christ? And knowing I'm loved, knowing I'm seen, all of those different things that totally changes the way I approach the work that God has given me to do. And I hope that that can encourage moms who are listening.
It will. So, so good. Make sure you guys get A Million Tiny Moments by Emily and her sister in law, Laura. And if we get on Amazon today, I feel like it could arrive and get yourself a Mother's Day gift. Just this encouragement. But I appreciate your work and just appreciate the mom that you are. And thanks for being here.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Christian parenting.